Hello, everybody. Today I have with me a fantastic and very interesting man, Rob Elings, joining me from Connecticut, but formerly quite a global citizen, as you're about to find out. Rob, thank you for being here today. I'm super excited to talk to you about your story. I know you're going to have some really cool things to share.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here. Yeah.
Can you share with us a little bit about what we need to know about you right now? Who is Rob and what is he up to in this moment in time?
Oh gosh, that's such a loaded question, but I'll try to keep it short. My name is Rob. I am by profession a brand designer. I work with mostly coaches, personal brands to help position them and craft a beautiful brand, visuals, the message, etc. I do this from home. I'm pretty much a solopreneur. I have a few people that help me, but mainly it's just me. And I also live near a farm that is my wife's family's farm, which is a sanctuary that rescues and homes farmed animals and give them a forever home. They're not being exploited. So we're all vegan. Also, that really helps to know about me. That's an important aspect of my life. And I also work with vegan community here to help them with their branding and messaging, etc. Other than that, my clients are pretty much all over the world since we work online mostly. Yeah, so I'm originally from Holland, as you had mentioned already, that I'm not originally from here, Connecticut, and I moved here in 2019, but I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
Yes, we will. I think that's one of the things about you that's super interesting. I know you've had many experiences all around the world, and it's really important for people to connect to that because we sometimes get stuck in our little world and we forget how big the world really is. So
Oh yeah, it is big
it is
and
big.
small and small. It's gotten
And
a lot
small.
smaller with technology because now I keep in touch with friends that I haven't spoken to normally maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and that is both a blessing and a curse, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, I agree.
So where were you born? Were you born in the Netherlands?
Yes, I was. I was born in Holland, the Netherlands, in a very sort of humble place. Both my grandparents were farmers, so that farming somehow is in there genetically. But I didn't grow up there. I moved very quickly. I moved so many times in my life, but it's in the east of Holland. But Holland is so small. I'm in Connecticut, and Holland is just slightly bigger than the state of Connecticut.
Oh, good reference. When you were in Holland, I know that you lived in Amsterdam for some time. That's probably the place that most people are familiar with.
Mhm.
So when you were a small child, did you live more in the country or in the city?
Well, I was born in the country, and then we moved to the city. Yeah,
Okay.
pretty at age 2 or 3, I think we moved. Yeah.
And what kind of things do you remember from that time of your life living in the Netherlands? What are some of your earliest memories?
Oh, wow. It's an interesting question. And it's so funny because it's only recently that I started to really go back and dig and find some of the dots and see if I can connect those to my current sort of just who I am and why I do certain things or believe certain things. I think from what I hear from my teachers and from my grandparents and my parents, I was a pretty happy child, pretty sort of carefree in the world, even although my parents divorced when I was 7. I never really made big fuss about it. To me, it was just like you just carry on. I'm also the oldest of 3 siblings. Actually, there's 4 siblings, but my older sister, she passed away when I was only 1. She was 3. And so being the oldest, I'm also like always had this idea that I need to be the strong one, the brave one, and take care of my brother and sister, just feel like a protector. But I was always pretty happy. I remember we played outside playing soccer, me and my brother, who was 2 years younger, and we would do that until it would get dark, and my mother had to force us to come back home, which is so different than today when everyone's just glued to their devices and their screens and all that. And you notice that you go, oh, we were so different. And then I'm, oh my God, I sound like my father or my parents when we were young. But it's
Yeah,
the fact we had great fun just being outside all day.
I love that. That's very similar to my childhood as well. I was always outside and stayed outside until it got dark,
Yeah.
probably every day, unless the weather was bad. That's really interesting. I think it's interesting as you explore your identity. I wonder how it's going to come into play that you think of yourself as the oldest child, but that wasn't your true birth order. Have you ever have any feelings around that?
Wow, that's so interesting you asked me that. Honestly, I have never really thought so deeply about this. And I guess as you get older, you reflect back on life and major life-changing events, I guess. My mom, who passed away in 2018, 2017, I believe it was. No, sorry, 2007, I should say. She did bring it up in later years also, because she never really talked much about my little sister who passed away, Monique. We did have a photo, or rather a painting of my sister on the wall, and some locks of hair. And it was always kind of like a sacred thing. It was just a thing. It was just there, just something that happened. My mom never really made a big fuss until later years, when she expressed how much pain she had, and how she dealt with it. I don't think she ever totally recovered from it. And funny enough, my mom passed away on my sister's birthday. Yeah, it was really far out. And I don't think it was really planned, because my mom was not well, but she was at night on her computer. She got up to get some aspirins or so, and she just collapsed and never woke up. And that was on my sister's birthday, would have birthday. And my mom had just changed the little icon of her MSN chat back then into a little angel to remember my little sister that had passed away. So that was very interesting around that. But that's my mom. But my sister was never really discussed very much until later years. We never thought about it. I never thought of myself as that older brother role, which was not natural. It was very, very interesting. I feel like there's so much more to unpack about that. Maybe with a therapist or somebody. It's for myself. We celebrate the day and we remember my mom who passed away on that day, but that's really about it.
That is giving me goosebumps.
Well, yeah.
There's definitely some significance there, especially with the dates and things. That's very interesting.
Oh yeah.
Did you have any sense of your mom being in a state of grieving or grief in your childhood?
Later, not well, yeah. As a child growing up, I would come home after school and find my mom in bed, often having stomach problems, or I don't know what it's called, the part of the intestines that she had something removed, and her diet was always very sort of difficult, and she struggled. Yeah, I mean, as a kid, you just don't really put so much weight behind it, or so you don't pay so much attention. Everyone gets sick every now and then, but I know that my mom was often in bed, was often not well, but she also was very strong, being a single mom, taking care of 3 kids, and we're pretty wild kids. We're always out playing, holes in our pants, but she did it all. She always had clothes for us. She made our clothes. She would bake our bread. Then she would play on the keyboards, Beatles music. That's how I got my first introduction to playing music. We would play together and record together. Homegrown. What do you call?
Yeah, just the family recordings. Oh my God, that sounds beautiful. I mean, she sounds like a very strong woman.
Super strong, yeah. Even although she's very frail, and especially in her later years, she always looked frail and skinny-ish, but she was strong. Her spirit was very strong. Yeah, I know that looking back.
Isn't it interesting, the effects of these things on our physical bodies?
Yeah, I definitely. No doubt.
Yeah, I'm very focused on that. I'm studying trauma and the effects on our physical bodies quite a bit. That'd be an interesting thing for you to look into. Wow, that's heavy. So what about your father at that time? Did you have a relationship with him?
So he left us when I was 7, and both my grandparents, they lived literally 5-minute walk from each other, right? So when we would visit my mom's parents, I would always, as the older boy, I would take a little walk and go to my other grandma on a Sunday to see if my dad happened to be visiting. And that was often the case. And I looked at my dad. My mom would always say, "Oh, you're just like your dad." I don't know if that was nicely meant. And my dad was always so happy to see me. So yes, I always had that relationship with my dad. And my mom would always talk sort of crap about my dad, that he was not really a good father and he was just a player. And she was right, and he was, until he had a stroke in 2008, 9 or so, and he's in a wheelchair and he can't really be the player anymore, but that's a whole different story. But yeah, I did have a relationship with my dad, more than my younger brother and younger sister. I sure did.
Do you have any specific memories from childhood that are funny or positive?
I know that my dad, because he was a real estate broker in commercial properties, mostly restaurants and hotels, and he would also have his own cafe or restaurant or various different businesses, and he would often bring me with him when he would go for a meeting with clients, and he was always so proud that I was such a good boy, I was such a big boy, and that I knew how to say certain things. So that's the kind of the memory that I had, that my dad was always proud of me. And when we were with the families, look, he's just so smart, and look at him talk or answer the phone. I had to always answer the phone because my dad had his office at home. And that's, I guess, how I also learned to think entrepreneurial and things like that.
So your dad taught you how to be an entrepreneur in a lot of ways. That's
Yeah.
very cool. And what about school? What kind of student were you?
I was always a top student. I mean, it's a bit hard to say that about yourself, but I always had flying colors, or passed with flying colors, or however you say that, and quite effortlessly too. And then it's when you're 12, you move on to, I don't know if it's equivalent to high school, but first you do a test. In Holland, it's the CITO, C-I-T-O. I think here is an SAT test, like at age 12. I'm not sure if it's the exact.
SATs are for getting into college. So you would do an SAT when you're 17-ish
Oh, I see.
at the end of high school. Yeah, I think we have other types of tests
Okay.
younger, but it's a different system. We don't have tests that will determine your path. I think in Europe
Okay.
you have tests that determine how you're going to go ahead.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, they're debating that politically right now, that it seems a little odd that at such a young age you need to
Yeah.
already sort of make a choice as to what you're going to be do the rest of your life. But
Yeah.
my test came out really well, IQ test, all these things. And so I was recommended to go to what they call a gymnasium, which is the highest level of follow-up from, like when you're 12.
Okay.
But all my friends weren't, and they were all going to the middle, sort of more average, just above average. And I joined them, which made it really easy for me. The other kids that went to that gymnasium, they're all people that worked to become lawyers or doctors and people like that. And I didn't come from an environment like that. My dad wasn't a doctor. He was an entrepreneur. He was a wheeler, dealer, whatever. And that was more in me too. And I picked up music. We had a little band, and I started to skip school maybe every now and then a little bit because it's just so easy anyway and all that. And then I started smoking pot. Right? I mean, who doesn't at age, I don't know what, maybe 12 or 13, 14, around that age. In Holland is pretty common. But then also my interest went out the window. By this time, I mean, actually, I had moved to live with my dad when I was 10, which was a weird circumstance. I shared that a little bit in the program that we're both in.
Okay. Would you share?
Yeah, I'm happy to
Okay.
share. I mean, it's kind of a weird story that I really haven't actually shared publicly, other than the group that we're in, which is not a public group, but I'm happy to share. And I'll keep it to just the sort of the essence. But so like I said, I was keeping in touch with my dad. And so my parents divorced when I was 7, and I went to school. And one day it was so arranged, and I was 10 at this time, that my dad would pick me up from school and take me out to lunch and just have a chat, right? And he noticed that I had holes in my shoes. And that was quite common because me and my brother were out playing soccer on the street all day, and it was very easy to have holes in our shoes. Nothing would last longer than, And he was, oh, that's terrible. You need new shoes. So he bought me new shoes, and I still know they look Nikes. That they look a bit like Converse, Chuck Taylor shoes, but they were Nikes, white with a black stripe. And I was so proud of them. Look at me, I got Nikes, they're super duper. And I came home, my mom was, oh, you better hide those and make sure that my stepdad, who I never accepted as a stepdad, he was just a guy that moved in with us. And he worked night shift, so he would often sleep during the day, and we had to all be quiet and all that stuff. It was a really weird vibe in the house. And I didn't really get the point. Why is he even here? But anyway, that aside, there was no real relation with him, other than being afraid that he would find out that I had these new shoes that I got from my dad, that obviously he didn't like my dad because of all the stories about my dad. So I made sure that I hid them in a compartment in my bedroom, and I would put them on and go to school. And then when I came home from school, we'd take them off and put them back in that secret compartment in my bedroom, until one day I came home and he was up. He was, instead of sleeping during the day, because he works at night, but he was up and he saw those shoes and he asked me about it. And I told him that my dad bought me those shoes, and he didn't become furious, but he looked at me with this stoic, angry look that's, well, if you love your dad so much, then why don't you move out and live with him? And I was, what do you mean? He said, right now. I said, right now? I couldn't believe it. And he made me put those shoes on, and I guess I brought a shirt or something like that, but he had me walk out the house, and I looked at my mom, who was kind of standing there frozen. It was really weird. And he just kicked me out of the house. And I thought, but I had come not straight from school. I had spent some time playing with my friends and I came from school. So I thought I'll go back to school and ask my teacher to call my dad and pick me up. But when I got to the school was closed, and there was nobody there. And so I came back to near our home, where me and my friends used to build huts, and there was a little bridge, and it was kind of our hiding spot. And we had hit there many times successfully without being found. So I thought, what, I'll spend the night there. That was just my solution. It was summer, or it was warm weather, so there was no problem there. And that's what I did. I slept there, and as soon as I woke up, I got up and started walking to school, which I arrived there way early. But I waited until the teacher showed up. I still remember his name. It was Teacher Wim. And most people are familiar with Wim Hof, the Wim Hof. So there's a very typical Dutch name, Wim.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if I told him exactly what happened, but I did ask him to call my dad. And either he or someone else called my dad, who would then, after the school day was over, would then pick me up. And that's what happened. And since then, I lived with my dad, but I was kicked out of the house and forced to sleep on the street for, one night, which I thought was just so, well, actually, at the time, I just did the needful, and I was just practical, and I didn't really have any emotion around it. Not that I vividly can remember, but in later years, I started to think, hold on, man, this is really messed up. This is a 10-year-old, you kicked him out of the house. And how about my mom? Didn't she just say, well, hold on, either you go out or, right. Yeah. So it was shocking later on thinking about it. Even now talking about it, I feel something in my stomach. But then I moved in with my dad. I mean, the story, I can talk for hours.
I think we could listen for hours.
Well, I hope so. I mean,
yes.
I don't, personally, I don't think that my own story is that interesting, but if somebody interesting, I have no problems sharing.
It's very interesting. That's definitely something to reckon with, that experience. Did you ever talk to your mom about it?
Yes, I did. And she apologized. It's much later. I mean, so I was 10, and it wasn't very long after that my mom split from this guy, and she ended up in a safe house with my little brother and little sister, because there was abuse going on and other things that I didn't know about. Yeah. But I found that out. And by that time, also my dad landed in jail. So my dad, who had remarried and had a stepdaughter and a half brother, they had a child together, my dad and his new wife, plus the wife had a daughter from a previous relationship. And so my dad ended up in jail. So I was not living with my mom, and I was not living with my dad. I was living with this stranger woman, this not my mom. And she was definitely favoring her child and my half brother. And I was kind of feeling really out of place and not fitting in. That was a really weird time. I got to be honest with you. That was not good. It made me very insecure. It made me very not wanted, or I'm a burden here now in this situation. And that's not what I want to be. I want to be self-reliant. I want to be independent. I think that's what I learned, to be on my own and to just forge my own sort of path. But that was rough. I ended up moving back to my mom when I lived in a whole different place. When you move so many times, you lose friends, your roots, your familiar places, especially as a kid when you're very much in your formative years and all these things. I always found that later on that I really missed that sort of close connection with friends that I've known since kindergarten or whatever that others may have. I know my wife has friends that she's known since she was 5 or 6 years old that are hanging out and sharing stories. So I don't have that. I didn't realize at the time, of course, that I'm missing out on all these things until later, when I had my first relationship and I saw how she was in such a warm family, and that they were all getting together and they go through ups and downs, but they're together. And I was like, oh, wow, this is how it's supposed to be. I thought what I went through is not normal. That's when I realized, when I saw that contrast.
It's interesting. I don't think of it as not being normal, because I think there are a lot of people who go through circumstances that are difficult, but that is quite a story. How did your father end up in jail?
Well, someone owed him money, and my dad had a club, a nightclub, and they had a bouncer. So he said to his bouncer, come with me. We're going to this guy who owes me money. And they just basically got him to give him his watch and his whatever he had to pay for the whatever money he owed him. And then the police was called, and that's how he got pretty much put in jail. I don't know if that's everything. That's the story that I was told. Yeah. But he was in jail for 12 months, which is a long time for something that, I mean, to take somebody's possessions to clear a debt or something like that. I don't know that you would go to jail for 12 months for that. And he was also in jail in the middle of nowhere. So it was like a 2-3 hour ride to even go and visit him. And then when I moved back to be with my mom, he sort of blamed me and felt that I left him and that I kind of betrayed him in a way. And I thought that it's so unfair to put that on me. Listen, I'm not the one who's messing up here, right? I mean, I just want to be with my mommy. Yeah. So these things that definitely shaped me, I think, in some way. I don't know. I lost respect for my parents in that sense, that not that I disrespect them or that I think that they're bad people, but I just think that they're not really equipped to prepare me for life, and that I need to find my own path. And that's what I end up doing.
Yeah. That's very gracious of you to say that they were just doing the best that they could, but they were not equipped.
Yeah, that's truly how I felt at the time. But to
That's a
me,
mature thing to realize at that
yeah,
age.
well, maturing came very early for me, right? When you're
Yeah.
10 and all these different changes at such an early age, and how you cope and how you. My grandma was saying, it's amazing how positive you always are. You're always upbeat, you're always creative, you're always making things, you're always happy. That's what she told me. I don't remember that. I mean, I don't remember being unhappy or being depressed or anything, but I remember my grandma telling me that I was always a happy child and I'm doing well in school, all these things. I don't know. It's just blessed that way.
Yes, I don't know what makes one person experience things that go into more of a downward spiral and somebody else could still be positive.
I think maybe also that's something that I got from my dad, perhaps, because he was definitely
Mm.
also uprooted. He lived in South America. I wasn't born there, but they moved there and then they came back with very little. He was the oldest son out of 9 siblings. He had to work for the family and give all his money to his mom and make it all happen. And it was tough for him to like adjust to this whole new situation that he didn't really want to be in Holland, but he made it happen. He made a business for himself. He did fairly well. And that optimistic, positive, can-do attitude, that perhaps I got that from him. So there's good things that I got from him, definitely, for sure. And he knows it. And I will happily admit that, the entrepreneurial can-do mentality, for sure.
It helps to understand the circumstances that our parents grow up under and how that shapes them, and then gives them their capabilities. Hopefully each generation that comes along, we're able to continue to ascend and do better than the generation before.
Yeah, there's this one song, I don't remember what it was called, but it's every generation blames the one before. And so when I heard that and read the lyrics and stuff, I understood that they're just passing on the pain that was passed on to them. And if it's going to stop, it's up to me to decide to stop that. And I'm not successful at it because I have my son who went on, I mean, a divorce also and all that. And that's the opposite of what I ever wanted. When I was 17, I want to meet my soulmate. I want to get married. I want to live in this love garden and have our children. I had this whole romantic idea. Lenny Kravitz had this song called The Garden of Love, or I built this garden for us. And that was kind of my romantic idea of this pure, never ending, limitless, undying love. I was a little bit maybe hallucinative, or maybe it wasn't really all that realistic.
But maybe you were making the fantasy because of the upbringing that you had.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a good question, actually. I was always a romantic in that sense, that I loved 60s music, the hippie era. I was born in 1970, so I just missed that. And one of my dad's girlfriends was from that era, and I felt like we were more friends than they. I mean, they were lovers, but we were friends. And she would talk to me about all the Woodstock happenings and the Beatles and all the beautiful sort of whatever she got from it. And I always loved that so much and always felt I wanted to embrace that. I wanted to embody that. I wanted to be that sort of hippie that chose to love and peace and all these things. World where that doesn't come natural. Look at the news, just look at your own family. These things. But
you can understand why those movements come about from difficult times, because people want to seek some sort of utopia.
Yes, absolutely, including me. But then I used to hang out with like friends that were into 60s music and trying to recreate the music, and then smoking pot, and that changed me. I think really it just changed me from, I don't know how it changed me, but it did change me, obviously.
In your teenage years, identity was kind of forming at that time.
Totally.
And you had this vision of who you wanted to be. And so you were in a band at that time?
Yes.
Playing music?
Yeah, I wouldn't, band and living room.
Okay.
We weren't performing or anything. And
But
we
you
did
were just having fun. So what kind of things happened in your teen years that would kind of propel you in a certain direction?
You ask good questions, really. You ask me questions that I know they're part of me, but I've never really thought about it or sat down and gave it any thought. I just know that going to yet another new school and introduce myself, make new friends, and then the kind of friends that you make, I don't know if they're always the best friends, but anyway, I always remember it being intimidating, and I felt it's too much to ask from someone that just supposed to just have fun and be carefree in life, right? With a young kid. Even I was 10, 12, and now I'm 13, 14, 15. It's still happening. I'm still moving places because my dad mostly. And then my brother joined us. So he left my mom to live with us because he was untenable. He was having difficulties in school with the police, getting busted for writing graffiti on the wall. We used to both write lots of graffiti on the wall and get chased or busted sometimes. Yeah. And then we got hired. Later on, we got hired to do graffiti on the walls, which is an interesting thing. Yeah, we're all very creative people in our family. But some of the things that are very impactful, I mean, my first girlfriend that I kissed, and it was a big thing, but I didn't know how to be a boyfriend or how to be in a relationship. And she was, are we ever going anywhere? It was just weird. I felt so odd. I didn't know what to do.
Well,
so
you didn't have a model of a relationship that you could emulate in a positive way.
Yes, totally. But what I do remember is that I was always working when I had time off on festivals, either with my dad or for a relation of my dad, like flipping burgers or cleaning the kitchen or cutting vegetables. I always had pocket money, which means that I always had pocket money to buy weed or cigarettes, which I'm not really sure if that's why I'm supposed to have pocket money, but that sense of independence and freedom and self-reliant, that was always kind of, those were big words, freedom. And it's even funny because when I was 14 or 15, a friend of my dad's, not Wim, but Willem, is a similar name, Willem. He was a palm reader and a numerologist, and he was a spiritual guy, right? And to me, that was, oh, interesting. This guy, spiritual people. I don't know what they do and how they are different than non-spiritual people, but to me, that idea was interesting. So he was, let me do your numbers. So he did a numerology for me, and I still don't know exactly what he did, but he just added my birth date, and he came to the number 5, and he said, number 5. He said, that's your number, and it stands for freedom. Freedom is your word. So that made such a major impact on me. He says, in the next coming years, there's going to be big changes for you, and you're going to seek out that freedom. Because freedom, that word became what I later interpret as my compass, my guiding sort of principle, or the thing that I would move towards. Being free, being free thinking. And still up till now, that is my biggest sort of, that is my word. That is very interesting that he gave me that, actually, that made such an impact on me.
Oh, that's really cool story. And it feels like your life is free because you can do what you're doing to make money from anywhere in the world. And you have this way of just connecting to people. And you said you're living in this animal sanctuary. I mean, that feels like a really free way to live.
Yeah, it's pretty free. I mean, there's another side to it. There always is, right? I mean, there's a lot to the story. I don't know how much detail of everything that you want, but talking about freedom, I have felt in the last 2 years, I have felt the most unfree in my entire life up until recently, right? For many reasons, but main reasons is that we just moved from Amsterdam. So me and my wife have been together for 23 years, since 2000. We initially lived in New York City, then we moved to Amsterdam or near Amsterdam. And then, because we were always planning to come back here and be with her family, we moved here in 2019. And then the year later, COVID broke and we were all in lockdown. And lucky we were in the countryside and being very, very blessed and very well taken care of in many, many ways. But all of a sudden, I had such difficulty walking up the hill, and I was out of breath, and I'm not a smoker. And I was, how am I so out of breath? What is happening? And maybe I need to see a doctor, because a few years ago I had felt something, a little flutter in my heart region. And I went to see my doctor in Holland, and she was, oh no, it's nothing. Just don't worry about it. When it's painful, then come to me. But I never had any pain, but I was so out of breath that I went to see the urgent care here in Connecticut. And he was, oh, I'm not even doing an EKG. You go straight to the emergency room. And they kept me there and they put me on a monitor and they checked me and they did an x-ray. And I had such a weak heart that I was not aware of. I'm pretty healthy in so many ways. There's an EF. An EF is the ejection fraction. It's just a medical term, which means the power by which it pumps, ejects the blood and provides it with oxygen to the rest of the body. But that should be 65 for a normal, healthy human being. If you're an athlete, maybe it could be 75. In my case, it was 12%. It was really weak. And therefore, it's working overtime, working really hard. And everything is wrong with me. So I was sent home 12 days later with a pacemaker and a defibrillator. And I'm a completely normal, healthy human being. And here I am all of a sudden in the hospital during COVID and getting this thing put in me that no one even asked me if I wanted that. But that's fine. I didn't pay a penny, which is also very funny because I wasn't insured at the time. I was going through my green card procedure. I had some insurance, but that didn't cover this. And so the state paid for everything. And then recovery comes and I have no energy. I was working maybe in the mornings a few hours and the rest I was resting or working in my vegetable garden, which I started in. See, I never had a vegetable garden and living in the city, but now moving to the countryside and also COVID, well, this is a perfect opportunity to grow tomatoes, cucumbers. I mean, everything, the whole vegetable store, so to say. But I was so tired. I was like, what's going on? And the doctors, seeing doctors every week and this pill, that pill. I take a handful of pills, which I will probably for the rest of my life. But the worst thing is my back. I always had a very bad back. And this is really getting really, really bad now. After so many wrong diagnoses and so many treatments and so many this and that, for the last half year until January of this year, but the half year before that, I was flat on my back. And I was really hardly able to do anything. So talk about being free. I was not. And I was telling my wife, I feel so unfree. I don't know what happened to my life here. Is my life over now? Am I not able to? Because you want to go to have lunch a half hour from here? No way. It's going to kill my back. You want to go to New York City, which is 2 hours from here? Forget about it. It's going to kill me. You don't want to be around me when I'm just miserable. I don't want to talk to anybody. Really, really, really miserable. And then I had my SI joint procedure by robot, took 45 minutes. Hallelujah. I am a new man. I'm freer than a bird. It just changed everything. And plus the energy that I didn't have that I thought was because of my heart all came back. I'm full of energy.
Fascinating.
No, totally fascinating. Amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
So interesting. Oh my gosh. Well, thanks for sharing that. I
Yeah.
definitely want to go back though. I know that you have had some very interesting experiences in Amsterdam. You shared a story with our group that you talked about when you were a part of the Hare Krishna organization.
That's right.
Can you tell that story, please?
All right. Listen, now it gets really juicy. Okay. So
I should get involved.
being the sort of romantic lover, hippie enthusiast, or whatever you want to call it, right? I had my long locks and nice and curly, and I was that person, right? And I was totally into Lenny Kravitz, and I believe that your heart can turn to gold. I had all these like beautiful ideas about life and love, but I didn't see them really being materialized and being embodied, or I wasn't experiencing them. I lost the love of my life. That is the mother of my child that we met when we were 16, I think, and stayed together. And that broke up because we were both broken people, right? And I just couldn't understand why such a beautiful love that we had and shared and felt and experienced, and that was real as anything, that didn't last. Now, how is it possible that such a beautiful thing does not last, cannot survive whatever may come, right? And so I was always kind of interested in meditation and spirituality. I picked up a book about meditation and I started to practice it a little bit at home. I lived in Amsterdam in one of my dad's places that I helped manage. And I tried to be vegetarian. I went vegetarian at that time because I learned about compassion and the Buddha and being merciful and also taking our own destiny in our own hands, right? By deciding how we want to experience the world, that our experience is our responsibility and all these things. I look not theoretically, but I was, whoa, I don't know if I'm doing it right. How am I supposed to sit and how long? And all these questions, right? I was, maybe I need some like company. Maybe I need some people to share this path with. And so I started looking at the local Zen meditation center in the middle of Amsterdam. And I went there for a meditation session, and we all sat facing the wall, meditating, staring 3 feet in front of us, resting our gaze. And that was fun. And then we all hang out outside and smoke cigarettes, the teacher and all these things. And that's a bit funny. I don't know if I want, I mean, I had judgments around that, right? So I moved on, and then I went to other places to learn about spiritual life. And I was even thinking of joining for the summer a Zen Buddhist monastery in France. That was a castle. I thought, oh, that's a nice idea. And I was reading this book still all the while, and it made all these references to the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is sort of the Hindu Bible, the yoga Bible. It's the scripture for all Hindus around the world. Coming from India, is supposed to be 5,000 years old, and it has all these different advices. It's a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. And the book was referring to it, but it wasn't speaking just solely on that, but it just put that in my head. And so one day I was walking on the street, and I was pretty sad because I just had a fight with my girlfriend that we're already breaking up, and it's already kind of really sad, the mother of my child. I was walking to see another friend of mine in another town. So I was walking towards the tram to catch the trolley or so, and to the railway station, and then go and see him. While I was waiting, I saw this procession coming by that was chanting Hare Krishna with the symbols and with the robes and all that.
They're wearing the long robes.
Exactly, shaven head, and because it was a festival, the girls were beautiful. They had these dots and these Indian decorations. And I thought this was from back in the day when the Beatles and George Harrison were doing the My Sweet Lord and Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. I thought it was a thing from the 60s. This now is 87. So I didn't realize that these guys are still around. How fun. And then they were handing out little packets with peanuts, and inside there was a little invitation for the Sunday program that was happening. And I looked at the address, and it was just like 2 blocks from where I was living. Anyway, I proceed on my way. Just before Central Station, I get off like 1 stop before, because there's a big square in Amsterdam where hippies and musicians and people hang out. But there's now transformed into this big festival ground with all the Hare Krishna stands. And so I was like, oh, let me just get off here and check it out. And then I read these billboards they had about the Bhagavad Gita, about reincarnation, about vegetarianism, about the soul. I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm reading about in this book. And these guys claim to be the source of that, to work with where all of this is coming from, right? So I was like, how interesting. Let me hang around a little bit. Anyway, long story short, there was a lecture that gave a little speech, and then they invited us to line up for a free meal. But I thought, free meal, that's for homeless people, but then I saw everyone just lining up. So I was like, oh, I better just get my share. And then when I had that food, it was all vegetarian. I was just turning vegetarian. I was kind of struggling to make it nice. And so when I ate that food, I think that's when the fireworks in my brain, in my soul, just went off. I had just arrived home. To me, I had just arrived. So anyway, I sat there for a little while, and I went on with my trip to see my friends. I got to my friend's home, where we would usually just hang out and play games or watch movies or smoke weed. And I was telling so enthusiastically to my friends about this experience. And one of my friends, the girl, she said to me, oh my God, you're going to be one of them within a year. I said, no, forget about it. You think I'm going to be walking around the street dancing in orange robes with a shaven head? Oh, no way, never. So anyway, day was over. I was home. I think this is on a Friday. And then the Sunday, this thing is happening, right? The Hare Krishna temple program, which is an open house every Sunday. They call the Sunday feast. And so I went there, and there was a lot of people, and I sat down and waited for sort of the singing. Usually starts first, and then there's a little speech, and then there's a meal. And when this guy started playing that Indian drum, which is a clay drum, a special type of drum, but when I heard sort of that bass sound that penetrated me on such a deep level, to me, everything that I learned, everything I saw, everything I tasted, I heard was totally, I mean, I think
all the senses.
It was past life. It was something was so strong for me. It was totally homecoming. It was home comfort. It was homecoming. And I picked up some books. I went home. I went again the next Sunday, and then again the next Sunday. And then I was telling all my friends about it, because I was always in between 2 places. I had 2 apartments because of my dad. I was always hanging out in these coffee shops, they call in Holland, where you just sit down, smoke weed and play backgammon or pool or football. And I was telling all my friends about it. We had like a very tight group of friends. We would go to concerts and see the Rolling Stones, Lenny Kravitz, and all that sort of music from that time. And I was telling them about this wisdom that I was just reading about, that I was, wow, this is amazing, guys. And some people really took to it, and they came with me to the temple, and some even stayed. I ended up doing after some time, and then I was, oh, hold on. I put a little break on it. I was, this is going too fast. You're liking this too much. We can't have this happen. I'm not a big reader by nature, but I was devouring these books, this knowledge, and I had to put it away for a minute. I was, this is getting too much. This is too real and all that. But it's funny because I had already had this idea that I wanted to visit India before I even met these guys, so to say. And so when the sort of the leader guy in the temple in Amsterdam, the president, saw me coming and being so enthusiastic, and well, before he asked me if I wanted to come to India with the whole group that was going, something happened to me because they saw that I was quite enthusiastic and I was coming regularly for the Sunday program. But this one monk that I was sitting down with and share a meal, he was, if you really want to experience the bliss of Krishna, of bhakti is the yoga of devotion of the heart. And he said, then you should come for our morning meditation. It starts at 5:30 or so. It's quite something. And it lasts until, including breakfast, maybe 8:30 and 9 o'clock, you'll be out the door. If you wanted to do that, I said, sign me up. I'll be there tomorrow morning. And that's what I did. I took my bicycle. It's really just 2 blocks from where I live. I rang the doorbell and I attended the morning service and the mass and all of the teachings and then someone gave me some beads, because at some point everyone meditates on their beads, on their mala, for about 2 hours and reciting this mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It goes on for 2 hours. And it was written on a big poster. And so someone gave me some beads and said, well, just repeat that and see how long you can do it for. And I was like, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I didn't know it was going to last that long. And I was, these guys are really serious. How long is this going on for? So I did this for an hour and a half or so, nonstop. And then there was a little lecture, and then they asked me to help out in the kitchen, and there was breakfast, and then I was cleaning the floor. And by this time, I'm with my big, long hippie hair, and I was smelling incense, and then it was time to go home, and I opened the door at 9 o'clock in Amsterdam, beautiful, sunny spring day or whatever it was, and I walked out the door, and that's when it hit me. I felt this rush of ecstasy, pure, natural. I said, this is the supreme happiness that is inside all of us, that doesn't require any substance or anything external to awaken that in me. And I have just experienced it. And I could not believe it. I could not believe it. It was so amazing that even now talking about it, it just gives me goosebumps. Everything was perfect. The world was perfect. The weather, my experience, just, yeah. I mean, I don't know how to express. It was perfection. I don't know if I attained enlightenment in that moment.
Wow.
But very close to it. So I became very,
you joined that group.
not consciously even. It was almost by a divine trick, maybe. I don't know.
Your essence kind of belonged to that essence.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. At that point, I was also George at some point when he said something to the effect that if I ever needed to make a choice whether I'm with these guys or with those guys, I'll be with those guys. If there was a war or if there was, we needed to, who you're going to be with, I was definitely on that side. Yes, you're correct. Yeah, emotionally, internally, I was in. This is my home. I experienced that home comfort, that cozy, warm.
Yeah, well, you'd not had that your whole life.
Well, you see, that's another very interesting point. I met my family. I've experienced this as my family, even although I'm very close with my brother and sister, even till this day. But that was a very interesting experience. And then, of course, I was asked by the president, who saw that I was so enthusiastic, what are your plans? I said, well, I'm saving up to go to India. He said, why don't you come to us with India? We have a discounted ticket. We can arrange all of the accommodations. We know where to go, where not to go, and all these things. And that seemed like a great idea. So I signed up for that. And a few months later, we were boarding the plane to go to Vrindavan, which is the holy place, the Mecca for Hindus in India. Vrindavan is close to the Taj Mahal, about 3 hours from Delhi. And when I arrived there, I was just crying. I couldn't believe it. that place is a magical place, I have to tell you that. Staying there for 2 months and then coming back to Holland, only to find out that the apartment that I was kind of staying in for free, that my dad had got rid of the entire building, and the new owner had put a sign on my door that I needed to call them and start paying rent. So I was, oh, okay. So now I have to pay 500 or 800 or so a month. And I didn't have that. And I would need to go get a job or do something, which I had jobs lined up. I was always working for my dad, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And so Krishna was kind of pulling me. I was like, okay, well, you can do this and pursue this path, or you can just come and live with us in a temple, which I decided to do. I didn't want to, it wasn't my plan, but I was kind of tricked into that a little bit somehow divinely. I surrendered, but it wasn't without a little struggle, because I'm still kind of independently trying, what, I can go to a Christian temple and get my little bliss fix, and I can do my little life here where I'm hanging out with my friends and do all these things and all that. But
you had your foot in both worlds.
I had my foot in both worlds, but not for very, very long. I kind of surrendered to live in the temple, but that temple that they had in Amsterdam was closing down because the lease was up, and they were going to a much smaller space because they had acquired this big castle in Belgium, which is about 2.5 hours drive from there, where people would live and work on the land, work with the cows or with the flowers or vegetables, and be in the temple and do other activities. There's a lot of activities. And so I was shipped there. I was moved there. So I was really away from my friends. I was away from my family. There's no cell phones at that time. But it was very interesting sort of struggle at times. Also like, oh gosh, am I doing the right thing? Do I want this? I mean, it's nice to be with the Hare Krishnas for a little bit, but Hare Krishnas, when you live a full-time monk, you're celibate. You don't smoke, drink, or do any drugs, even tea or coffee. You don't eat meat or eggs, and you don't gamble and do these kind of things, right? So that's kind of like a vow that you take when you are being ordained or initiated into that culture. And I didn't know I was completely ready for that. I don't mind joining and singing and doing all the things and washing pots or cleaning the floor or whatever. But to completely embrace that kind of lifestyle, I wasn't quite sure. Although I was slowly adopting that lifestyle, I was doing all these things already. It was not very difficult for me, but it was
It's very interesting. How old were you?
So I'm 17, 18 at this time.
Okay.
And so what happened is I had such a good time in India when I was there, because I studied. There was a structure every day. I had a different class. You learn scripture and culture and rituals and things like that. And so I wanted to go back. So I had saved money. I was always kind of good with money. I had saved money, and I just told the president in Belgium at the time, in the big castle, I saved money to go to India. I want to go there in October. And I maybe spent 6 months there. And he was, yeah, sure, if you have the funds and all that. So I did. And I went to India, stayed there for 6 months. And that's when I shaved my head. My beautiful black curls that everyone, that the girls love, that I love, I was very attached to. I just lived like a monk. I was living a full monk life, going to bed at 9 p.m., getting up at 4:30, doing all the meditations, doing all the mantras, doing all the services, the seva in the temple. And then I had to come back to Holland again, and I went back to India. And that's when I stayed in India almost permanently and lived in India for close to 10 years. It was a period when I was stationed there, and I would still travel, but India was my home. But I would visit Singapore, and I would also go to Europe, but tour Europe and go to various temples. We would have a whole group that would travel and do festivals and all that. I accepted a spiritual master who's my teacher, that I lived with him in another place in India near the coast, the East Coast. That's where I learned also to transcribe his teachings in word, from audio to word. And that's when I learned design. Because we were
fascinating. So you were living as what would you call that? A Hindu monk?
Yeah, you could call it a Hindu monk or a Vaishnav monk. There's Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, and the devotees of Vishnu are called Vaishnavas. So that's really the word for it. But a Hindu monk, I would accept that. Yeah, definitely.
And now, did you have a child at this time?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I did not. It was at this time when I was wanting to sort of make a difference. And I was working hard to work with our temple complex. That was a big, beautiful complex that needed manpower. And I wanted to do something with publishing. And I also wanted to fundraise for our projects. There's so many Food for Life, or giving food to the hungry, or food insecure, and also doing construction or doing printing, and there's money needed for that. So I would hit up donors, and many donors would be in Singapore or Malaysia, where there's a lot of Hindus or Indians that want to do pious works or make donations, and it's my job to connect the two, right? I would also wanted to report on what's happening with your money. So we'd create these magazines and periodicals, and that's how I learned.
So you learn graphic design and
page
marketing, branding, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's how I started. I was always doing airbrush, and I did murals before I went to India and all that stuff. That was always my passion and interest.
Painting. Did so with your early graffiti days, but that translated into doing mural work and stuff. So you're super creative.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
All right. This takes you up until the end of your 20s. Is that right?
Yeah. So the other thing that happened is I was maybe 24, and I'm in the ashram in this place in India that I was describing on the eastern side of India near the coast. And I'm sitting there at 6 a.m. in the morning one morning. And my guru lives in a very simple hut that he built with himself, but with his own hands, like a decade or 2 decades before that even. It always stayed very simple. And then he would come out usually around 7, and he would walk up the many steps and to the actual temple, and then he would do the rituals, and he would give a speech for 2 hours or so, a class, right, daily on the scriptures and all these things. So he came out that morning, and what happened is, like, I'm sitting there because I usually do my mantras and meditate a little bit near him, near his hut. It's beautiful weather. It's so nice to be there. And we would have many tourists or people visit him for a day or to come and stay in our guest house. And so I see this rickshaw, this motor rickshaw, pull into the sort of the driveway. And who gets out of the motor rickshaw? It's my ex-girlfriend, who ended up being the mother of my child. So my heart went boom, boom, boom. You have no idea. I was, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this happened. I mean, before I went full time, we both tried this Hare Krishna thing a little bit, but she had her own personal problems, health problems. She was struggling with eating disorder and things like that. We were just not going to work out. And I decided to just be a happy monk. And I wasn't interested in pursuing relationships, or at least not at that time in my life. I just wanted to give the monk life my attention and effort. And so she shows up, and my heart went boom, boom, boom. I was like, oh my word. And so we acknowledged each other and then had a little chat, not much, but she checked in and all these things. And my guru came out that morning to give the class, and he saw me sitting there, and he knew that she was here, and he put his hand on my shoulder. He says, be careful. She's coming here to test you, to see if your dedication and your commitment to this is strong enough to remain a celibate monk. Or anyway, long story short, I think 2 years later, we ended up getting married.
Okay.
At this time, my guru also passed away, and we got married in Malaysia. Or I don't think we ever got officially married. We thought we did, but later on the paperwork, there was no record in whatever. So we never really married, we never really divorced, but we did have a child. We ended up moving to Bali. We lived in Bali for a little while, but our relationship was not really happening. We were not supposed to be together. We were so different. And so it didn't last, sadly, right? So you have all these examples from my younger years of how not to do it. And here we are eating the exact same thing.
Well, that's true, but you were brought together to make the child.
Beautiful boy. He's 25, turning 26 next month, and he's not here in the US, but lucky for FaceTime, etc., that we speak regularly. And he's been here for the last so many years. He's come here every year, hang out with us. And
so how long were you married to this woman?
A year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was very quick. A year, maybe a year and a half. Yeah, it came and went.
Okay.
So we're just not meant to be together. That is very obvious.
Well, what was it living in that part of the world as a young married person and then having a little child?
Well, we were in Bali, and then we came to Holland to show our baby to her family, to our family, my mom as well. So our family. And then it became apparent that he had some issues breathing. And long story short, he had to undergo heart surgery before he turned 1, right? Ooh. So now that I've had my heart problems and I've talked to the family, apparently this runs in the family. Oh. No one told me that, but my aunt, my dad, my grandfather, my youngest uncle, they all had heart issues. Some died, and some were early on. And if I had known, but anyway, my son had this heart issue and he needed to be operated on. in Holland. So we spent more time in Holland and less in Bali. We did end up going back to Bali and Singapore where I worked. And then we split up and she moved back to Holland. I stayed in Singapore. And it's a new phase in my life after our marriage failed. And I was sort of the dad that wasn't there, which was such a big thing to carry that burden, because that's not what I wanted to be. That's as far as possible from what I wanted to be. And here's the reality. And it was very hard for me. It was so hard. I've never really told anyone or shared this with anyone. So I don't know why I'm sharing this now, and I was like, what? Screw that shit. I did everything right. I'm living a monk life. I gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to all of our projects, which I'm happy to do. I gave my every waking hour to this. Here I am trying to do the best I can. And now I am the bad guy. I was like, what? Fuck that. I'm just going to have a little party for myself. And I started hanging out with some friends that were kind of Krishna friends in Singapore, but they were kind of not really being the monk type Krishna friends. And so we were smoking dope again. I was having a drink. I was popping pills because I used to love popping pills, ecstasy. And in Holland, way early on, I thought it was just fantastic. Ecstasy in a pill, right? You don't have to do anything. You just pop a pill and you're happy. And that became my sort of, for about a year in Singapore, that's all I did. I just partied hard. I was the king of the dance floor.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So you went the total opposite direction.
Oh yeah, totally. I dyed my hair black. I had blue contacts. I was having piercings. I was dancing, hanging out with. Yeah, I had a great time. I mean, I met so many good friends that I'm still friends with. But of course, I knew that it wasn't probably the healthiest thing to do. But my reasoning was, well, listen, I'm not hurting anybody. If anything, I might hurt myself. But why is that of any concern to anyone? Just celebrate life instead of all this fighting, and just dance. Just follow the music and all that type of thing. Yeah.
Well, at some point you decided to change that. What happened next?
I don't know if I decided to change that. Like, I was done with this whole idea of love. I was, screw that. That's not
okay.
That's not really happening. But then that changed me, because I knew that wasn't really me, because I know I believed in love. And so I started to believe in love and open myself up to that. Again, a partner, somebody committed that I longed for, that I wanted to have. And I knew that if I opened myself up for that, that would happen. That's when I met Britt on the dance floor, like through a mutual friend. And because she has Dutch roots and I'm Dutch. And my friend was like, oh, you guys should meet each other because you're both Dutch. I took her out for a dinner date, and I was like, well, what do you like to eat? She's like, I don't care as long as it's vegetarian. And I was like, oh, you're vegetarian. I'm vegetarian. So I fell in love with her instantly, and we're still together. And it's funny because I was just done with Singapore, and a monk friend of mine who was in India, but he's Australian. He was flying through Singapore to come and pick me up and join him in Singapore. No, not in Singapore, in Sydney, for the Sydney Olympics that year in 2000, and to sell stickers. That's how many of us would make money, sell stickers at the car park or wherever in the stadiums. But it was really hard to get a ticket because of the Olympics. Everything was fully booked. And so I had already given up my apartment. So I had 2 more weeks on the apartment. And this is when I met Britt, and we spent the day together. But she was living with her best friend, a gay friend, who was employing her to work in Singapore, managing a fitness club. And we were all hanging out, and they were, well, why don't you just move in here? I was like, I'm losing my house, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to. And that's what I did. After 2 weeks of meeting them, I did move in and never moved out. And we're still doing it. Well, he's in Sydney, her friend, Jim, and we're here in Connecticut. Yeah. I mean, I was ready to marry her. I said, I'll marry you. I knew it. I knew who I met. She has like a little Hare Krishna root somewhere when she was 19. And when we met, we were 30, I think. And that was very, very, very interesting how, because I mean, I dated other girls, but that was never really anything that I saw much of a future for us. But I was totally, I was completely taken. My heart, she stole my heart. And it was good.
What was it?
It was just everything, the whole package, the way that we talked, the way that she looked at life, how her kindness, her warmth. She obviously did grow up in a very warm, tight, loving family, a broken family, divorced, but everybody was very much in each other's lives, the new partners and all that. And it was, which I didn't know at that time when I met her, because I did meet her mom also very shortly because they all visited. And her mom grew up in Holland, and here's this Dutch boy. So that was so fun and all these
Mhm.
things, right? So there was a lot of connections. There was a lot of dots that connected. And I just felt very normal around her. It was a friend. It was an old friend. It was, again, it felt like homecoming. There was
Mhm.
no
Yep.
BS.
Yeah. It's really amazing how you were able to tune into those moments that felt home over the
Yeah.
course of your life.
I think that I'm a sort of a heart-centered kind of person. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's the word, but I have to have that intuition. There's something in me that I learned that that thing that brought you will never cheat you. I learned that in Krishna
Mm.
philosophy. The thing that brought you to the good stuff,
Which
that,
is a feeling, that inner knowing.
yeah, that inner knowing, that it's more than belief, it's more than hope, but
Yeah.
it's really a deep knowing. Somehow or
Yeah.
other, I do have that very strongly. That's why I also can get very stubborn about things. When I know something really much for sure, don't try to talk me out of it. I'm happy to hear arguments and all these things, and I think I've learned to be better at it. But I can be very stubborn in certain things because I just have such firm belief in my feeling about the thing, whatever the thing
Yeah.
is.
I think it's interesting how, as human beings, that feeling that we kind of all strive for, and some people just never get, but it doesn't necessarily come from the family you're born into.
It's maybe the family I was born into sort of pushed me to that point where I'm not dependent on my parents for
Mhm.
protecting me or saving me, that I have to find my own way in life, and that there
Mhm.
must be something that I need to go by, that
Mhm.
North Star or that
Yeah.
guiding
It's a
something.
homing instinct.
Definitely.
Yeah. And you were able to develop that. Maybe people who grow up in families where there's more security don't have the chance to develop that on their own as much or
Yeah.
as easily.
Yeah, I believe that. I think so. It's if you're never exposed to germs, then your
Yeah.
immune system is also going to be very underdeveloped,
Weak.
perhaps.
Yeah. I
We,
think that's absolutely true.
yeah.
That's for sure. You have to experience some adversity to be able to learn the things you need to learn.
Although I don't really wish it upon,
No. But who
people
does?
to go through some of the things that I went through. I went through some very dark things also that are very uncozy and unpleasant and unhappy to think about.
But you have the contrast.
Yeah, which is funny that the contrast is there. The darkness and the light, they're both so
Mhm.
intense. They're not
Well,
just,
that's what makes you such a light, such a person of light,
well,
is
ask my
because you
ex. It's been so many years and we can still fight. I don't know how it is that she
Mm.
triggers me that nobody else does.
Well,
It's,
those are the places where you need to take a look, right?
I try so hard. I try to be honest and sincere, but it's just, she comes in the chat or just something that she's, you just don't care. You just absolutely, I don't know. It's just so
Mm.
unfair. It's so unfair. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I just take it as karma or something that I've done maybe in this life or past lives. I know I've done many mistakes. I try not to battle it or try to right the wrong, or I try to
Mhm.
be more accepting and see that indeed as something that I can
Mm.
work on.
Maybe she talks about you the way that your mother talked about your father.
And my mother also talked to my ex about me being like my father. So that didn't help either. That
Yeah, how
didn't,
do you feel about that? How does that make you feel?
I felt betrayed about that, actually. It's kind of funny that I'm sharing this here in a quite a sort of open, and I have no problems with it because I consider myself to be quite open in a, and I don't know why I feel that with you sharing that.
Well, because it's going to help someone who's listening. There's
Yeah, I
somebody
did
who needs to
feel,
hear.
yeah, I did feel a sense of betrayal. Why did she say these things about me? Because I was reminding my mom about my dad, that my dad had these same sort of characteristics. And I was very much moving away from that. I didn't want to be like my dad in that aspect. And then telling my ex about me and my dad. And then for my ex, it was like, oh, okay, I get it now. That's why he's like that. But I don't think I'm like that, or at least not to the extent or whatever. There's a lot of words and that were said that I always thought that I just let it slide. I just let it sort of evaporate in as time goes by. But I feel that it never really evaporated. It's still in the air, in people's thoughts, in people's beliefs. And I wish it wasn't so. And
Yeah. Well, what kind of father do you think you were?
well, I was not present until later because we split up when he was 1 and I moved back to Holland when he was 5.
Mm.
And so since he was 5, me and Britt, my wife, have been in his life. That
Mhm.
was the reason we moved to Holland, to be in his life. And he lived literally 5 minutes on
Mhm.
bike ride from our home. And we were in each other's lives, but there was this trauma, there was this darkness that was hanging over us, the relationship, what he was hearing about me from his mom, and there was an unfair, we were at a disadvantage. And I always felt that my mom said lots of bad things about my dad, but I ended up making up my own mind about what I believed about him.
Yeah.
And the relationship that I had with him, for good or for worse. And I always thought that will also happen with my son, that one day he'll come and inquire and find out, and we have our own relationship. And that's what did happen. But he also ended up in rehab, drug addiction and stuff like that when he was, I think, 16 or 17. And that was also very confronting for us, because it's not just the therapy for him. We're all involved in his therapy and the healing and the confrontation and the shadow and wow, that was heavy. That was so heavy for me to think that I had this effect on him. All of us, but me specifically, of course. And it's, oh my gosh, yeah, a lot of tears, a lot of conversations, a lot of healing, a lot of cursing, a lot of everything.
It's just so striking how deeply our experiences affect us, but yet it is our responsibility. We can't control the things that happen in our lives sometimes, but we can control how we respond to them. And sometimes we don't have the wherewithal to form an intentional response to situations until maybe we learn more or we're older.
Thank you. Absolutely. You said it 100%. I learned that later, and I'm still learning that. But at that time, I didn't have that knowledge or power in me.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I had that power in me. I was more reactive and impulsive in my reactions and in my words and in my sort of doing what I thought was right. And that hurt people. Oh yeah, definitely. It's not until much later when I started to get into, and that's funny because I studied all these books. Trust me, I can speak the Sanskrit verses back to front and explain them and talk about them for 2 hours, but I can't live them.
Whoa. That speaks to me because everybody has experiences in their lives that they wish they could have done better. Everybody has those.
Oh.
And the idea that you were off doing good things, doing good in the world, but yet there's the irony of your personal life. But for me, it's not good or bad. It just is. I guess our interpretations we make the meaning for that. But I want to read you something. I just have a note in my phone because I've been reading the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Are you familiar with that book?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
One day, this is a doctor. He's talking about a client of his. And here's a quote. He says, "One day he told me that he had spent his adulthood trying to let go of his past. And he remarked how ironic it was that he had to get closer to it in order to let it go."
Wow. Yeah, that is exactly how I experienced that, which is more in hindsight, right? At the time, living in it, there was a lot of hellish moments that I wish that could have been avoided. And I don't know if they could have been avoided. I don't know. I mean, I had to live through them, but it's other people also, the hurt that they felt and whatever they brought to the table that have maybe also contributed to that. But it wasn't until I learned more about Tony Robbins, right? In 2000, forget the year, 16 or so, with friends, that we ended up going to London and doing the fire walk and doing all the
Oh, you did that?
Oh yeah, I did all that. Yeah, several times. I'm a full out guy. I go full in, right?
That's what I'm thinking right now as you say that. You just go all in. You think of something and you've done it.
Yeah, I don't have average experiences. I go all the way.
You don't. But that's amazing. That's one of my, I don't want to call it a regret, but if I had things that I could wish would have been different, is to go in on experiences like that, to have more experiences like that. I don't have those.
Yeah, I did the full Tony Robbins program for a good year and a half, and I paid thousands. I did every program.
Yeah, it's super expensive to do that, right?
That exists on the planet. And I was just, sign me up. I believe in his philosophy. I believe in the power within us that is just sort of waiting to be unleashed. And you choose what you do with that, good or bad, right? I mean, it's the electricity that makes the heater hot or that makes the fridge freeze. It's the same electricity. That's up to you how you serve that, how you work with that. And that's something that I learned through his program and also the community. I won't say that I love everything about it, but I think it has definitely shaped me as in how I live my life right now and how I see the Hare Krishna or the Bhakti part of me and how I integrated that into my life and understanding me, how I am.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a cookie cutter monk. I am still me. I may live a monk life. I have so many identities, but me and my values and beliefs and my worldview and all that stuff, I learned that in the Tony Robbins sort of ecosystem. And that I'm very, very grateful for that. It's amazing how I learned what you just read and the intentionality about our response. That's what I learned. I follow Danielle Laporte as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm in her community.
Yep.
One of the few guys that's mostly
Okay.
yeah.
I read her fire starter sessions many years ago. I think all of this stuff, the personal development piece and the spirituality piece go hand in hand. And the idea of self-leadership ties into freedom. I guess you have to have the inner knowing, the personal awareness to be free.
So interesting. What you're saying about the spirituality and the self-development, I think they need to go side by side because you can be very spiritual and be a complete a-hole.
Yes, you can. Yes.
But I've seen them and I've probably been that too. Oh, I know this thing and that rule and this blah, blah, blah. You can't do that, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't do it with really getting to know yourself and self-discovery, self-development, I think that spirituality can become a weapon. People use the Bible or whatever scripture as a weapon to beat others on the head about how wrong they are.
Or to say there's only one way. This is the only way. It's very fixed mindset. I think personal growth, really, you have to have a growth mindset because you're going to continue to evolve. It's never finished.
And then if you do a lot of self-development, I know these self-development junkies, they're in every seminar I've ever been to. And it's nice because you high five, hey, it's here, it's you again, and blah, blah, blah. But if there's no sort of spiritual compass, then it can also become very manipulative. Are you manifesting or manipulating your lifestyle? And so to have that sort of that spiritual compass to embody your virtues and develop those, and to me, those need to go side by side, hand in hand. That's my own experience. And as you mentioned that, I just realized that they're both super important. And I realized I started my own business and I started doing design and branding and all these things and started working with the top coaches in Holland, the biggest ones that were there and making the millions. And we're also doing very well. And I was doing all the Tony Robbins stuff and the business mastery included, as well as the sort of personal fulfillment and achievements that go hand in hand in his program. I was learning that in order to be that successful business or guy, I need to become something. Who do I need to become in order to be that successful person? And I didn't like that. So what I learned that the thing that matters most to me is that spirituality. I don't mind if I need to become a poet in a chair on the deck and write my poetry that maybe one person may read or no one may read, but I'd be totally content and fulfilled in life. And I'd be a nice husband. I'd be a nice friend. I'd be a nice father. That to me meant so much more than achieving all the success in the world, but being unavailable or just being busy or just being, strictly business. I didn't want to become that person. I realized that. So I did let a lot of business opportunities sort of go, a lot of things that I didn't pursue because it didn't align with my sort of newfound, that was always there, but it became so much more prominent and dominant in my life and the direction of my life up till this very day.
Well, you definitely have a sense of non-attachment, which is very admirable. And I think that gives you a freedom as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting blessing that, again, I can only call it a blessing. The way I see it and explain it is that I know I did a lot of services to my guru, to my spiritual guide, and to the community. I did what I could. Don't try to beat my drum or pat myself on the back, but these are just factual things. And I feel karmically also, I feel like I'm being taken care of. I'm in the most beautiful place. I have the most beautiful in-laws and family around me that even at a time when I was really not very productive, there's no mention. You're just here. Everyone's taking care of you. And you can be who you want to be. I've always been this Hare Krishna guy that I don't hide because, this weird Hare Krishna dude. No, I'm a Hare Krishna follower. Even till now, I meditate, do my mantras every day for an hour, 2 hours, as much as I can. I serve very much in the community. We just started a huge project doing just that, giving a name and a brand and a message to the deeper yoga, bhakti yoga philosophy. sense of detachment, I think it's kind of almost like a byproduct. I just try to follow my heart, try to do it what aligns most.
And you are successful. So it's interesting in that when you do have that trust that the universe is taking care of you, it does.
I feel that too. Yeah. I am very, and I will be more than happy to admit any moment of any day to the people around me how lucky I am and how blessed I am. And I wish that upon everyone and anyone. And I try to pass that on whenever I can and help someone with their whatever struggle or with their business type sort of questions. Try to be there for them as well. I'm still trying to work on that aspect with my son. That is, he wants to come here. It's just more of a logistic thing with his job and stuff like that. But that's something that I have work to do in that area. So you say successful. I hear that and I accept that, and I consider myself also content and happy in life. I have the best partner. I have the best in-laws. I have the best of everything. Really, honestly, I do feel that. And I have a lot to complain about, trust me. There's a lot of things that aren't right. But that aspect with my son, that part of me that needs a lot more healing. So that's my job. I feel like it's some part in
that's what you're part of what you're devoted to now.
That needs my devotion. Yeah.
Yeah, but it takes time, and it's the right time now. Maybe going forward, now is the right time. I heard something from a spiritual mentor of mine recently, and he told me that when you heal yourself, you heal 7 generations before you and 7 generations ahead of you.
Yeah, I don't know who your spiritual guide is, but it's exactly what I heard. Yeah.
And I love that idea because it gives me hope. I had another discussion with someone else who we had this little debate. Can you ever be truly healed? What do you think about that?
That's very interesting. It's something that I find myself avoiding that question. It's almost like once you're an alcoholic, you're always going to be an alcoholic, right? I'm so-and-so, I'm an alcoholic, although I'm dry for however many years. I mean, I've never been a big drinker, but for example, right, that's what they say. No, I always had an issue with that. And I've always felt that it's puts such a label on people. To identify myself with the broken part of me, although that is a part of me. So can we ever be fully healed? Personally, while we're embodied in this life, I don't think so. I think that there's always something we can still work on because life never stops teaching. So the learning never stops, right? Whether that's healed or.
Yeah. And I mean, some people would say that we are embodied to learn those lessons.
Yes.
That's the reason we're embodied. And once we heal, we're no longer embodied. We're something else. We're spirit.
I was going to say something to that effect, but I didn't want to
be too woo-woo.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I believe. Because every situation we're going to encounter is a new situation that has never occurred before, and which calls upon us to react or respond or be intentional or not in a new way. And that new way is what we're learning. Today I learned, oh, if I stick my finger in this thing, I'm going to burn it. That's something new that I learned. So I'm still learning, right? And tomorrow I'm going to learn new lessons that I don't know what they will be today. So am I ever fully healed? It's a really good question. Yeah.
It makes me think about this as an analogy. If I step on a shard of glass, it's going to cut my foot. I can't ever avoid things that are going to cause me injury. And so does that mean that I'll always have something that will come along that I have to heal from? I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't want to consider myself or us as broken, that we're always broken and that we always need some to be fixed or to fix ourselves or so I think that we are definitely a whole being that is embodied, and the embodiment is causing sort of the struggle of how the spirit wants to express and live and experience the fullness of its spirit and the limitations that this body puts on that experience, the lens through which we experience and see and observe, and our interpretation of that causes the pain, which it may not be so painful if we didn't interpret it. I mean, that's the brain's workings, which is very funny because the brain is really the deception of perception.
Right, because the brain is not the mind.
Yeah, the brain is not the mind. Our intentionality plays a big part in that, how we want to experience the world. And what do we need to believe about the world and our experience for So that is something that I'm learning to navigate. But for myself, I can say one thing, that I know that if I start my day with this intention and prayerful, and I chant my mantras, my malas, I consider that to be such a part of me that I do that every day, consciously, unconsciously. But if I fill myself up with that goodness, with that spiritual power, that Shakti, it also works as some sort of a protective shield. That my day is automatically, I'm more in flow. Things are happening in an auspicious way, almost automatically. And I
like that. You just coined a word. Did you hear that?
I heard that.
You said automatically.
I did. Yeah, but that's
that.
It's not a new word. Like, I've read that.
Oh, I love that. I never heard that before.
Oh yeah, cool. Wow. Thank you. Well, there you go. You're welcome. It's a good word because it does describe perfectly how I experience that feeling when things, as opposed to other times when things are just not working out. Nothing is working out. This thing is in the way. That thing is falling off. Things are just rough. And there are days.
Yeah. I also think, as we talk about this, these are things that show us that we are self-healing beings. We have the capacity to heal. And I extend that to physical things as well, which is, for me, is interesting. And it's interesting to think back to your health issues that you referenced earlier, and that how those might be tied to your experiences in the past, and how you can take the power to heal them.
Because my heart, I had very little say over it. I was diagnosed, it was fixed medically, and I'm grateful for that, and it is amazing. But my back, I've tried for the longest time to work with that energy. It's something in me that's causing this back pain. I was not able to ever transcend that.
Yet.
Well, I mean, now I don't experience it since I had surgery, which the SI joint, which is sacroiliac, which is the most misdiagnosed backache there exists. When they finally did make the right diagnosis and find the treatment, which was a pretty sort of by robot, the 45-minute, they put 2 screws in it. I'm not entirely without pain, but I have my life back. And that to me is also the medical science that I have so much trust in, since my heart.
So there's a balance. You have to learn how to navigate the self-healing world with interventions that man has created. We've created these to help one another heal. I mean, it's all part of the same wheel, in my estimation.
It's also part of the healing, right? That we invent these things.
We invent things to heal. It's all part of it. It's really.
But we also invent new diseases. Funny enough.
Yes, we do.
Like the new types of things that from our food and from our whatever lifestyle.
Yeah, there are a lot of toxins, intentional toxins that we have to navigate that. And that's why awareness is so important, in freedom.
Yeah, that's why living in the countryside and growing our own food, which I'm not doing this year, but I have, because we just moved, and it was, but having that access to our own grown, and because we have our cows, so we have our cow dung, so it's all circular, and it's that to me has also been amazing, eye-opening and mind-blowing to be able to eat off your own land from the soil that was nourished by the cow dung from your own cows that are also being fed only nice, beautiful, no hormones. They're not being fed for production. They're just living their life, grazing away. So that circle, I always experienced that as also very helpful to the spiritual sort of beingness. If all these other things are also of some sort of pure nature, not toxic, non-toxic nature.
I love that. Yes, I love that. And I just want to ask you a couple more questions. So this farm that you're living on, it's a sanctuary, I take it, for animals who needed sanctuary.
Yes, correct. Yeah, some of them are from a dairy farm where the cow no longer gives milk and it's going to be sent off for slaughter. So we take that cow. Usually there's an adoption program or some sort of, it's not like we just take the cow, but a short story is that cow comes to live at the sanctuary and gets sort of integrated, because that cow might be very sort of fearful and it's shaking because it's never really gotten any warmth. It's just sitting there on the concrete, standing, eating. And if it doesn't eat fast enough, your lunch is gone. So that whole existence with thousands of cows. And so when that cow then comes to the farm, it takes a few months, but you see them transform before your very eyes. And now they want you to touch them and to brush them and to talk to them. And they come to you rather than running away from you when they first arrived. And so there's cows, there's turkeys, there's chickens, and they all have their story from some sort of abuse or neglect situation. And they are part of the story that the sanctuary tells about animal compassion, choosing compassionate, living. And they help to tell the stories, and people come and experience the animals and clean their stalls or whatever.
It's really beautiful. It feels to me like those animals are experiencing what you experience with the feeling of coming home.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, that's nicely.
And they must. So what's the thing that you learn the most from living with those animals?
That they are sentient beings and that they are loving beings, that they experience love and warmth and being accepted in a group, or being not always on the run for the humans that are after them or that need to exploit them, or that they need to be on a clock to produce. Or also when you have a sanctuary, so I don't live on the sanctuary, I live 15 minutes away from it, but my wife works there. It's her brother and sister-in-law's farm. She's the manager and she's there. That's her thing. I spend time there every now and then. We do farm sitting, and we spend time on Mother's Days and other. But it's so funny because instead of talking about what car do you drive or what kind of race did you get or promotion or this and that, people talk about the sort of the animals and the industry and the compassion that we're trying to all be an example of. And so that makes it for nice conversations rather than these empty shallow things about the latest car, which, I mean, I'm not against cars, but it's just different. It's a very nice atmosphere. It's very beautiful on a hill, 44 acres in the rolling hills. Yeah.
It sounds beautiful. It takes you away from some of the weeds that we tend to get stuck in, people watching the news and getting caught up in bad news kinds of things, negative things. It takes you away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
that's great.
Yeah.
You've lived all over the world. What is the best place in the world in your estimation?
Oh my gosh. So the best place in the world is when I can't say from whatever perspective
of the places you've been, right?
But where I lived with my guru, with my teacher, to me those were the best years in my life. But it wasn't the best place in the world because it was rough, because power would go out, there's no hot water, there's no running water at times, or food is not always nice, with stones in the rice and all these things. But it was my best years in my life. Other than that, being in Bali was very beautiful, right on the ocean. It's a divine, it's paradise, celestial, the island of the gods, right? And the food is just amazing. And so that was really nice. Being here in the rolling hills of Western Connecticut is very, very beautiful. I would say probably one of the more beautiful places I've lived in terms of freedom, nature, being away from the city and that sort of noise that is constantly there. Although here you have a different type of noise of tractors and people mowing the lawn and all these things, which is new to me because we never had that living in the city. So I would definitely say that where I'm right now is probably one of the more beautiful places, for sure.
I feel like you have that sort of ability to be in the moment and appreciation for things that you might say that about almost any place that you were living.
Yeah, well, I've lived in Singapore where I lived. I wasn't really happy there. It was very concrete. And that's why I needed out. So no, I wouldn't say, but Singapore's nice, very super efficient, nice people, good money, all of the above. There's very efficient, but it's not a beautiful, it's not a
beautiful place. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, because this is the Blessings podcast, we need to talk about what are the blessings and the lessons that you have to share with other people. So let's start out with the lessons. What would you say are the biggest lessons that either you've learned or that people should learn in their lives?
Whoa. So, okay. The biggest lesson, I don't know about people or even should.
Or for you personally.
For me, yeah. So for me, the biggest lesson is to take personal responsibility for the experience that we call life and to really work on that experience and how our beliefs and our worldview really helps shape that experience, and that we have a great influence on that, and that it may take a while to figure that out, but I feel I touched upon it and I'm working with that. But I think that we can't avoid that. We need to wake up and become conscious of that. That to me, I think is the biggest lesson, to work towards that, or to open ourselves up to that possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And what about your blessings?
So my blessings, oh my gosh, I never stop counting those blessings. I think it's also coming to a place where you learn gratitude and to take a moment to look and see how good you have it, even although a lot of things aren't going right, or even if you have health, or if you have food on the table, if you have loved ones that surround you, that are concerned about you or that care for you, I think you're seriously blessed. It doesn't need to be some big sort of cosmic spiritual revelation of seeing light beings and all that, which is also there. I have the most beautiful friends and people in my life that I work with, that I play with, that I share with, laugh and cry and all that. So those are my blessings, my wife and her family and our life here in Connecticut. And then also the people that I get to work with, which are always kind of clients turn friends, or friends that turn into client work and all that. It's probably not the most professional thing to do, but I really enjoy it. And that is my biggest blessing. I think that I can be me in the work that I do. So I don't have to wear a shirt and tie or be a certain persona that I'm not, just because the client expects it. So my clients and we are all very much of the same sort of types.
Yeah,
That is my blessing.
you're authentic. You're the real deal. You're just a true-hearted person.
I try.
Yeah, it's beautiful. All right, I'm going to ask you to answer one last question in one word. What is the most important thing?
Love.
How did I know you were going to say that? Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Rob. This has
Oh,
been unbelievable.
oh,
I cannot wait to re-listen to this conversation many times because you've got so many nuggets in here.
I hope it was useful. Honestly, I've definitely enjoyed it. I experienced it as therapeutic. Definitely. There's things that I talked about that I've never even thought about, let alone talk about. So thank you for that.
That's a
Thank you
treasure
so
to me.
much.
Thank you.
Yes,
I'm
yes,
honored that you were so open. Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you.